Our second lesson for this morning comes from the New Testament letter to the Hebrews. And I'll be reading from the 11th chapter, the 29th verse, through the 12th chapter, verse 2. Hebrews writes, "By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. But when the Egyptians attempted to do the same, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received the spies in peace. And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenching raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign enemies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in caves and in holes in the ground. Yet all of these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God." Friends, this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Last month, I had the opportunity to spend some time with my brother at my sister's house in Kansas. My mother and my aunt also live nearby, and my sister is we call her their overseer, but she takes care of them. And one of the first things that happens when we all come together is we take out the old photo albums. And those pictures are the reminders of who we are as a family. And each snapshot brings back a memory of a person or an event that in some way has shaped the history of the Palmer family. And we always chuckle as we spend time flipping through the pages and looking at those old black and white snapshots. And that's the way it is with every family. Our memories and our history are the things that shape us and make each family unit unique. And it's that way with God's family too. We are brought together by our memories and by our past. That's what makes us who we are today. And we have our photo albums too in a book called the Bible. The books and the letters that we find there are the snapshots of who we are as the people of God throughout our history. And just like in our family photo album, sometimes those pictures from the past can be unflattering. I look at some of the pictures of myself as a child and I wince. Sometimes those pictures that we see in the Bible of the family of the people of God can be downright disturbing and hard to look at. For instance, we can look at the reading from the prophet Isaiah this morning. The prophet paints the picture of a beautiful vineyard, a picture worthy of the cover of a landscaping magazine as he describes it. The vineyard is immaculate. It's planted in good soil. The rocks and the stones have all been cleared away. The vines have been planted and they've come from the best possible cuttings and they've received the best possible care. And there's even a watchman, a guard on duty to make sure that no one comes in and vandalizes the vineyard. There's a wall and hedges built around the vineyard. And a big vat is constructed in the middle to receive the juice from the grapes that they hope will be made into fine wine for celebrations. It's a beautiful picture that Isaiah paints. It's full of hope and full of possibility. And then the story changes. We hear about hope becoming disaster. In spite of all the hopes and the plans that went into that vineyard, we read that the grapes that grew were wild. They were awful tasting grapes. No good wine could be produced. The owner expected one thing and got something else. And in frustration, the vineyard was torn apart. The wall was torn down, the hedges were uprooted, the guard was dismissed, and the plot of land was left untended and turned into an overgrown mess. And Isaiah goes on to tell us the meaning of this snapshot. He says, "The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed. Righteousness, but heard a cry." God had called Israel to do some great things. He put everything in place, and God had some high expectations, but those expectations were not realized. The Lord expected justice. The people produced bloodshed. The Lord expected righteousness, and what God heard instead was a cry. And I think that story is a good reminder that it doesn't take much to knock God's people off track. In fact, in the Old Testament Hebrew, the words for justice and bloodshed are almost identical. There's only one letter difference between the words. And the same is true for the words righteousness and cry. At a quick glance, you would think that you were reading the same word. And that was for a purpose. What Isaiah is saying is that it can be easy for us to do exactly what God does not want us to do, while being convinced that what we are doing is the right thing. We have to pay attention to all the details of the picture. And that's just what the writer of Hebrews is trying to do this morning. He invites us to remember who we are by inviting us to take that family album, to take the Bible and look at the snapshots of the people there. People like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, all those whose lives, whose stories of faith we should know. People like Rahab, Barak, Samson, Japheth, David, and Solomon. There you have unknown names and names that we know pretty well. They're all in the album. They all went before us. But they didn't have who we have. They did not have Jesus. And yet, their faith is a witness for you and I to look to. If they could do great things for God, not being able to know God as well as we know God, doesn't it follow then that we should be able to do even greater things, because in Christ we have a better picture of God than they had? And as good as that sounds, we struggle anyway, don't we? We still mess up the vineyard. And our pictures in the album are not real flattering. But then the message of Hebrews turns a corner. And laying the album before the faithful on the table, the writer turns to you and me and says, well, what do you think? And we move from the vineyard of Isaiah to a running track inside a huge stadium. And the letter to the Hebrews issues a challenge to those who are following Jesus. Offers a challenge to you and me. It says, let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. There's no sugarcoating the fact that this is not an easy course for us to follow. This is a serious contest, and there are all sorts of obstacles that can trip us up and all kinds of baggage that can slow us down. But the point of having a photo album of these faith giants, like the 11th chapter of Hebrews, is that we can remember that there have been others who have run the race before us. We can remember how they handled the contest, and we can see them as our examples to follow. And we are the ones on the course right now. We are the ones that are running the race. So how's your run going? Probably you've had some days that are better than others. Some days maybe you felt like you could run forever. Other days, each step, each stride is a challenge. Some stretches of life are a snap, and other days you wonder if you have enough strength to make it through. The people in the photo album in Hebrews were far from perfect. We know that. They tripped and they stumbled and they fell. Sometimes they even ran the wrong way. But God stuck with them. God did not give up on them. And as they continued the course, that love brought their hearts back to God and turned them around. And the letter of Hebrews suggests two things that we should take on the course. He says, lay aside every weight and sin that clings so closely. There's a reason why our worship service each Sunday begins with a prayer of confession. When this group of runners comes together week after week, it's our time to lay aside that weight and that sin so that we can continue to run freely, run without burdens. So remember the contest as the course stretches out ahead of you. And the letter reminds us that we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, that the stadium seats are full of folks like the faith giants of Israel that we just read about, and their only purpose is to cheer us on as we run in faith. They are the company, the gathering that we call the church, the communion of saints. They know how tough the race is because they have run it. They know how easy it is to stumble and trip on the littlest thing because it's happened to them. And they are with us as we take on the race. The roar of the crowd, as we said with the kids, can be a great thing. I like the thought that there's a company of saints in heaven who are cheering for me as I go through life. I like the thought that there's also a company of the believers in the church that meets here Sunday by Sunday to praise God. And I'm grateful that we can encourage one another to be the people of God and to produce fruit that God has planned for us. And this letter that was written to the Hebrews challenges us to remember that company, that gathering of the saints when the race for us is not going too well and we're tempted to drop out. When I was in high school, I was on the cross-country team. I wasn't very good. Every race seemed to be a struggle for me. But the great thing that happens in cross-country is that every runner on the team is important. The order that you finish the race affects the team's score. So when the faster runners on the team cross the finish line, they don't pat themselves on the back for a race well run and then sit down on the bleachers. They go back to the finish line or even run back along the track, along the course to cheer on their teammates who are still running, who may be struggling. When was the last time You cheered on a teammate in faith who was struggling. Remember the company that you're part of. We're called to encourage others just as much as we are encouraged. So remember the contest. Remember the company as you run the race. But then race to the picture in the album. Let us run with perseverance, the writer says, the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. The image here is one of a coach or a captain. Our son also ran cross country in high school, and he had an amazing coach who could almost outrun most of the members of the team. Before each race, he would often run the course himself so that he could give the team directions and a plan for victory. And the team listened because they knew the coach had just run the course himself, and he knew what he was talking about. He was the pioneer. He had gone ahead. He had scouted out. He'd been there. So his words had weight. His words had value, and the team listened. Friends, Jesus has been there for us too. Jesus has run the race. Jesus knows the course. Jesus has blazed the trail so we can trust his instructions. And that's also why we are here Sunday by Sunday. We're called to remember the captain. And that's why this scripture is so important. We need to know the plan so that we can run the race well. And when we read that Jesus says, love your neighbor as ourselves, for instance, we can trust those words because we know Jesus, the pioneer, has run the race, and he knows the course. That's great news. But there's more. Jesus is our pioneer, but we're told he is also the perfecter of our faith. There's not a person here who's going to finish the race without making a wrong turn, without getting lost, without tripping and falling, without losing sight of the rest of the runners, without dropping out and having to start over, sometimes all before breakfast. Jesus alone has run a perfect race, and what's amazing is that Jesus has the power to make the record of our race perfect as well. He will bring us to the finish line. He will snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. He will perfect us. He will complete us. He will bring us home. That's what a captain does. A sprinter named Derek Redmond was one of Great Britain's best medal hopes in the 1992 Olympics. Derek had a history of injuries that had kept him from being as successful as he might have been. In his race career, he had stumbled and fallen often. But with the support of his father, he hung in there and was injury-free when it came time for him to run in the Olympic Games, when it came time for him to take his place on the world stage. As we think about our race, as we think about our faith journey, and what the Bible has said about remembering the contest and the company and our captain, I hope we have a video that we can show this morning that see how Derek's race turned out. So let's see if that's up there for us. Derek's father brought him home. Let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Put yourself in the picture. Run the race. Your captain is there to carry you home. Amen. Would you pray with me? Our Lord, our God, our captain, our encourager, our coach, walk with us, run with us, walk beside us, carry us home. Give us hearts to run our race. Give us strength to finish that race, and where our strength fails, we give you thanks for carrying us through. Thank you for the gift of the amazing love you give to us each day in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.